These 8 tips I'm sharing today are going to help you create a drought-resistant and heat-tolerant garden, and also help you with water conservation.
Hey DirtMagicians, who you just saw is Jolene from our sanctuary garden. The record-breaking heat this summer has us really worried about the future of our vegetable gardens. You know, are there going to be water restrictions that impact how much we can water? How are our leafy greens going to do with all of this heat? And that is why we invited Jolene to share with her tips on a climate-resilient garden. If you want to see her own YouTube channel, then we've linked it in the description box below. So excited to hear these tips. Take it away, Jolene.
Thanks for the kind introduction. It certainly has been a very hot summer. And in fact, it is forecasted to be in the 90s here in the Pacific Northwest, even up to 100 degrees in this next week. Tip number 1 is mulch. Mulching has amazing benefits, and one of my favorite mulches is using straw. Applying mulch around your garden helps conserve moisture. It prevents evaporation and traps in the moisture within your soil. Straw is my personal favorite mulch, but there are many different kinds of mulches you can use. You can use wood chips as a mulch, so make sure that when you're using them that you're not tilling them into your soil, as they can tie up some nitrogen. But applying on the surface of your soil, especially around perennial plants, is a great option. Some other great options is to use fall leaves and grass clippings. There are also plastic and synthetic materials that you can use as a mulch. I prefer to use organic materials because as they break down, they will feed your soil organisms. Mulch also protects your soil from extreme temperatures, either extreme cold or extreme heat. Mulch can sometimes deter pests, except for things like slugs that actually prefer mulch. So just be aware of that.
DirtMagicians, we've linked our favorite mulch in the description box below.
Tip number 2 is to make sure that your soil has sufficient levels of potassium. Potassium is the 3rd most important macronutrient that your plants need. I highly recommend that you test your soil first before you ever add amendments to your soil. This is so that you don't overdo it. If your soil has enough potassium, don't add any extra. But if your soil is lacking in potassium, a great organic solution is to add green sand. How potassium helps in drought tolerance is that it improves the root structure and elongates the roots of your plants, and it creates a root zone that makes it easier to take up nutrients. It also helps plants adjust their water loss through respiration on the leaves. So in general, it means that you're going to be watering less and the plants are going to be more drought tolerant. Once again, always test your soil before you add organic amendments, because adding too much can have a negative effect on your plants and actually stress them out and make them less tolerant to drought. So test your soil, and if you are a little low in potassium, add some extra.
It is so exciting for me to be learning from another highly experienced gardener. Also, hit that like button to give Jolene some gratitude for all of these knowledge bombs that she's dropping for us. And let us know in the comments which tip you're going to be implementing next year in your garden. Because Jolene is such a skilled, highly knowledgeable gardener, we've partnered with her to run what we call a garden circle, where once a month, her and her community of like-minded gardeners come together to not only learn from Jolene on a specific topic, but also from each other. If you're interested in these garden circles, then we've linked our Eventbrite. Give that a follow to find out when the next garden circle is going to be. All right, back to Jolene and her tips.
I hope that these tips have made a lot of sense to you, and that some of these you can apply right away in your own garden. Tip number 3. Tip number 3 is to add rain barrels under the water spouts of your drains. If you're going to be using this to water your garden, you definitely want to be filtering your water so that you don't get a bunch of contaminants off your roof. But if your only purpose is to use this around perennial plants and shrubs that you're not eating, you certainly don't have to add a filter. This rain barrel that I have here is a very primitive system. It is very simple. You can certainly make yours more elaborate. Mine does not even have a filter. I only use it to water my shade garden. But we have this chain here that comes out from our drain spout that drops the water into the bucket. And then we have a spout here for getting the water. Although using a rain barrel won't completely eliminate the need to water your garden with a different source, it can make it so there's less load on your local aquifer, and if there's water restrictions, it keeps water in your garden. Tip number 4 is to make your own Oya. Oyas are an ancient watering system that are made out of terracotta pots usually, and terracotta is a semi-permeable material. So as you add water to that pot, the roots of your plants will take the water that they need. Once again, this is not a way that you can completely eliminate having to use other water sources, but it does increase the amount of time between your waterings. And it makes it so the root zones of your plants always have access to some water. Although you can purchase an Oya, it is so easy to make your own. I just took large terracotta pots, sealed the drainage hole, and put them in the soil with some water and put a lid on top to prevent things from falling in. I have an entire YouTube video on how I made these terracotta. Make sure you keep the water levels high in your Oya to always have water available to your roots. Tip number 5 is to water your garden deeply. This means that when you water, you're going to water the top of your soil surface till it's wet and continue to water until when you dig down about 3 to 6 inches, the soil down there is moist. It's best to also give periods of rest where you're not watering your garden all the time to allow the surface soil to get a little bit dry. You don't want it to get bone dry, but you want just a little bit of dryness to allow your roots to gain strength and go deeper looking for water. Also talking about watering your garden, tip number 6 is to water in the morning or the evening. Watering in the morning is the best because as the day progresses, it gives your plants a chance to dry off before the nighttime comes when plants are more susceptible, wet plants are more susceptible to diseases. Evening is also a good time because as the night progresses, it allows the water to be absorbed before it evaporates by the sun. But do keep in mind that some pests like slugs love a wet environment at night when they are most active. So decide which one works best for you, either morning or evening. Just try to avoid watering in the middle of the day. Whew, it is a relief to get out of that sun and into the shade. There are a lot of shade-loving plants, so tip number 7 is to utilize shade and create shade in your garden for those shade-loving plants. Some of these include things like leafy greens, such as your spinach and your kale, also a lot of your brassicas, your cabbages and broccoli. This is a part of my house that doesn't get a lot of sun, and so I have planted a lot of my leafy greens. Even though it's going to be 90 degrees plus this week, I know that these plants are going to do just fine. You can even create areas of shade in your garden where maybe there's an archway and in the morning it gets sun, but in the afternoon it casts a shadow, and so it creates shade, and that's where you can plant some of your cool weather things. So besides creating shade in your garden and finding areas that have shade, you can also plant things under other plants. For me, one of the ways I did this year was planting broccoli that gets very large and big, and then putting lettuce underneath, which tends to be a little more low growing. So the lettuce was always a bit shaded by the broccoli. This takes a little bit of creativity, but when done well, you can have a lot of cool loving plants that love shade throughout the whole season. Now we're down to our last tip. Tip number 7 is to plant native plants. Native plants are adapted to your local climate, and so they actually need less water and are usually more heat tolerant than plants that are not native to your area. Native plants are most often perennial plants with a very long life cycle and very deep roots. This is why it makes them so drought tolerant. Not only are native perennial plants great in using less water, but they also support our local pollinators and many insect populations. There's a lot we can do as urban and rural gardeners to support our local pollinators who are struggling with this climate change. Check out this video by Dee and Bree on how to create a pollinator habitat within your garden.
Bye!
Bye!